Good afternoon. Welcome to all of you on behalf of EcoPeace Middle East and the Klingenau Institute. This online event of today will discuss the potential merits of environmental peace building in perhaps one of the most sensitive politically parts of the world, the Middle East. My name is Louise van Schijk. I'm head of unit at the Klingenau Institute here in the Netherlands, and I'm the moderator of today. At Klingenau, we host the Planetary Security Initiative. It's a project that aims to reduce climate-related threats and risks to conflict and stability, thus promoting sustainable peace in a changing climate. In June 2021, for instance, we organized a live meeting in the south of Iraq, and on our website you can find an overview of what we call climate security practices. These are activities to use climate security insights for peace building and conflict prevention. And this is also a field in which EcoPeace Middle East is very experienced. Klingenau is interested in climate security from both hard and human security perspectives and aims to serve diplomats, defense and development experts in their work in this field. The website, the Planetary Security website, serves as a hub of policy relevant information, and I invite you to register for the PSI newsletter should you not have done so already. Today, we aim to have an open and interactive discussion on the potential for environmental peace building in the Middle East. I would like to emphasize the need for respect and understanding of each other's viewpoints, since security issues in the Middle East are very sensitive and viewpoints differ greatly among different countries or strands of societies. I think it's very important that today we discuss climate change in the Middle East. And before we started with the webinar, we discussed already that still in the region, the temperatures are unbearably high and that the summer was also the warmest on record. And indeed, climate change is hitting the Middle East hard with unbearable temperatures, water scarcity, desertification and saltwater intrusion, threatening livelihoods and undermining local food production. After the recent eruption of violence between Israel and Palestine, the need to address underlying stresses of grievances of people living in the region is a factor that deserves extra attention in our view. And whereas conflict over identity, history, territory, etc. are very hard to overcome, it may still be possible, and it's also unavoidable, to enter into renewed dialogues over how to build resilience against climate change, how to use renewable energy to enhance the level of energy security, and how to work on climate adaptation and the energy that's also needed for air conditioning and water desalination. In a region prone to tensions, climate change is a common enemy that all people in the region are facing. And we think, and also EcoPeace works on this, that's also then a potential entry point to bring people together, to at least talk to each other about the issue. This online event will consider how a focus on climate change and both adaptation and mitigation could be used as such an entry point for bringing together people that otherwise might not talk or hardly talk to each other. What can they gain from entering into a dialogue about the better management and distribution of scarce natural resources, for instance, the water in the Jordan River? Or what can they do to prevent disasters, natural disasters? And may this also foster a more general spirit of mutual understanding that stretches towards other issues. The dialogue will particularly look into approaches to combat desertifications, dialogues over the Jordan River, which is at risk of drying up, and cooperation to provide more renewable energy for the region. It will link to donors increasingly active on the climate security nexus, such as the European Union. What could we, and with we I mean also Europe and countries like the Netherlands, gain by scaling up climate security practices in the Middle East, and how could we help or assist, or what shouldn't we do? And to discuss this issue, these issues, we have a fantastic panel of distinguished speakers with us today. Jana Abu Taleb, the director of EcoPeace Middle East in Jordan, and she will discuss the EcoPeace approach to environmental peace building. Dr. Shadat Attili, he's an advisor ranking minister at the negotiation support minister of the PLO, and he's also a former water minister. Professor Alan Tal, he's a member of the Knesset, and he knows really a lot about how Israel deals with climate change, and is also one of the geniuses behind EcoPeace Middle East. And then René van Ness, he's the head of Division of Conflict Prevention and Mediation Support at the European External Action Service. And we know that he and his team are really keen also to see how climate change can have a bigger place in the EU's foreign policy, but also the conflict prevention and mediation work. But also that they still struggle with ways how to do it and what it would mean in practice, what policies would change. We intend also to have Q&A, and for this my colleague Tobias van Losso is joining. He spearheads the Planetary Security Initiative at Klingendael and is a leading expert in the field of climate security and in particular the water conflict nexus in the wider Middle East region. So if you have questions, and I know that also some of you have already asked questions when registered for this event, please ask them in the Q&A. Unfortunately, the Q&A option is only open to the Zoom participants and not for YouTube viewers. So if you join through YouTube, it's not possible to ask questions. All right, enough of my talk. Let's go to the distinguished speakers. I first wanted to give the floor to Jana. Jana Abu Taleb, the director of EcoPeace Jordan. And EcoPeace has 3 directors. You are the director from Jordan. There is also a director from Israel and a director from Palestine. Jana, could you say a few more words about EcoPeace Middle East? And also, what have you achieved in the past years? Because you're already there for quite a long time. And we would be curious to hear, how did you cooperate over these shared natural resources in climate change?
Thank you, Louise. To start, I would like to thank our wonderful partners at the Klingendael Institute for co-organizing this very important webinar. The timing of this webinar could not have been better, especially after the recent wave of violence, to pose and evaluate how to move forward and hopefully restore the minimum amount of trust needed for future cooperation through the constructive dialogue in our part of the world, Louise. I'm happy to say that I am a proud member of the EcoPeace family. EcoPeace is a regional organization that brings together Jordanian, Palestinian, and Israeli environmentalists with one aim of promoting cooperation over our shared environment, bringing sustainable development and cross-border water resources, conservation and protection. We're often described as unique because of our structure and our approach. So in terms of our structure, I can say that we are the only trilateral civil society organization of its kind. But in terms of approach, we work with both governments and the local communities, the people on ground, where our top-down advocacy is complemented by our bottom-up cooperation. We were established in 1994, right after the signing of the peace treaties between Israel, Jordan, and the Oslo Accords between Israel and Palestine. And the rationale behind environmental peacemaking is that cooperation over the environment and shared resources helps prevent future conflicts from arising and creates necessary conditions, hopefully, for addressing future threats that do not recognize national boundaries that we have put as people. So in this respect, cooperation over climate change provides an underlying theme for people, the private sector, diplomats, governments, to engage in dialogue and cross-examine the potential benefit of regional solutions when compared to the unilateral actions. Another aspect of what we do is to provide decision makers with innovative solutions to advance or help advance negotiations through identifying low-hanging fruits. So integrating recent changes, whether in technology or climate change threats, can facilitate new approaches to the conflict where old dynamics are not only less relevant at this time, but can be obstacles. The most important aspect of what we do is really our educational program. So throughout the years, thousands of students have benefited from the training materials that we provide. While addressing current challenges is most important, it's the future generations that will bear the brunt of climate change, with increasing droughts and severe water scarcity, which we are witnessing. It is essential for them to learn about water management, water diplomacy, and green entrepreneurship. I can say that our crowning achievement is when foreign ministers, senior diplomats from our region and from the international community listen to us, consult us, and integrate our vision into their work. It is indeed a humbling experience that we are very proud of, Louise.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you, Jana. And also having followed your organization for the past years, I can also really testify for this, that we have seen your good efforts, like, for instance, a new game on the Jordan River, and also, let's say, the innovative approaches that you use, or bringing together mayors from different countries, or so it's really impressive. And now we learned that you are embarking on a new initiative, which is also kind of an effort to calibrate trade on renewables and desalinated water between the two countries. Could you say us a bit? Could you tell us a bit more about this newest initiative and how far you are with working on that?
Yes, thank you, Louise. So, I mean, we have many initiatives, but our most recent is called a Green Blue Deal for the Middle East. It includes accumulated knowledge over the past 27 years of EcoPeace's research, working on ground with decision makers and the local communities. It addresses the impact of climate change on national and regional security, and turns it from a multiplier of threats to a multiplier of opportunities. And it consists of 4 main components that can be applied either in part or as a whole. So our first component really focuses on water and energy, 2 of the most important resources and that are of security concerns. Through capitalizing on natural relative advantages of each of our 3 countries. So if we look at Jordan has a natural advantage of harnessing the sun through investing in solar energy. Israel has the natural advantage of its proximity to the Mediterranean and the application of large-scale desalination, while Palestine has a mixture of both advantages, both in Gaza and the West Bank, including its geopolitical advantage of any future infrastructure. According to a pre-feasibility study that we've already conducted at EcoPeace, these arrangements have financial, technical, and geopolitical advantages over unilateral decisions. If we look at the second component of the initiative, it's relevant to the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and how these advanced technologies can help advance negotiations over water issues between two sides without holding the issues hostage to final status agreements. So if we look at Israel, it has a political leverage to make concessions in relation to water issues with the Palestinians because of seawater desalination and discovery of gas in the Mediterranean. This leverage can be utilized to solve water issues first, which would build the necessary trust to address more complicated issues between the two sides. Third component focuses on the work that we're doing on the rehabilitation of the Jordan River, with the aim, of course, of having the river once again become the regional natural water carrier. So in 2015, EcoPeace published the first regional master plan for sustainable development in the Jordan Valley and proposed a set of 127 projects to advance sustainability. We're working on emphasizing the role of private sector in advancing the projects that the master plan addresses. We've been working with the private sector in all three countries and internationally, and have produced feasibility studies to some of these ambitious projects, which would bring them closer to implementation. The fourth and final component that we're addressing is education for peace and sustainability. We aim to integrate aspects of our educational program into the national curriculum and to train our young professionals in becoming successful entrepreneurs while addressing climate change challenges. So I can say that our Green-Blue Deal is relevant and addresses and discusses international initiatives, mainly the US Green New Deal and the European Green Deal. The unifying context allows international community to weigh the foreign policy implications and the applicability of such programs on advancing peace in our part of the world.
All right. Thank you so much, Jana. And you were already mentioning the EU Green Deal, which is a topic we follow quite closely at Klingendael. And that's also a question we have. We know that the EU is very much interested in climate change. It is very active and ambitious on the climate change agenda, but it's also increasingly active in what it calls the external dimension of the European Green Deal. And we will also talk about it with René van Ness. But my question to you would be, and I think for the sake of time, we have to keep it a bit short, but in what way can the EU or European countries help best? And would you see this is more in terms of funding, actual climate mitigation, adaptation projects, or is it rather more to facilitate dialogues and encourage countries, for instance, as part of the Paris Agreement on climate change, to consider water scarcity, desertification, energy poverty, and so on and so forth?
Yes, very important, Louise. So, I mean, to be honest, Europe has a vested interest in solving the Middle East conflict because of the geographical proximity of the two regions. Europe has political leverage in the region by virtue because of its support to national governments and its balanced approach to the conflict. So we can see that climate change can provide an underlying theme for active diplomacy, where building necessary infrastructure can serve, of course, to combat future threats and simultaneously move closer. We were discussing Palestine towards Palestinian autonomy and independence, not only to allow Palestinians to have more control over natural resources, but to also look at gradually building final status agreements in that sense. So pushing towards low-hanging fruits, like solving water issues and not holding water issues hostage in order to gradually rebuild trust and restore dialogue is something very important for the EU to really support in our region. But also, it's important to look at resources in terms of financial resources to support regional arrangements, but not in a traditional way, Louise. I think we should look at ways to think outside of the box. Let's face it, most countries in our part of the world or our region are driven by the desire to access the available funds, let's say, rather than being motivated by climate change actions. So I think the EU here has a very important tool to play in making sure that available resources, which are needed in our region, are really focusing on climate change, adaptation, and mitigation.
Yeah, so it's not the immediate priority, and the EU can help to bring a bigger emphasis. Yeah, all right. Thank you so much. I think this was really valuable and also provides already some food for thought. I think it's now important that we go to also a policy representative from the region, Dr. Shadat Attili. Huge amount of experience in the PLO on the water issue. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Shadat, how do you view efforts by an organization like EcoPeace Middle East? And is it still possible to engage in cooperation over water and climate change in the region, also after what happened in spring? So how do you look at this sensitive issue? Please, Dr. Shadat, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Louise, for your question. I really highly appreciate the work EcoPeace is doing and what also EcoPeace is pushing for, and do whatever initiative they are taking, especially the last one related to the Green-Blue Deal that they are pushing for in the region. As well as their excellent work they did related to the rehabilitation and the master plan related to the Jordan River. The problem that we are facing here in the region, how to make promises, how to make hopes really, and how to convert it into action. I have really a historic experience in the region and in negotiation. And also, there is a little that I can really talk about a successful outcome. I here start with talking about the work that we did related to the Dead Sea. When we reached an agreement of 3 countries, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, and when we worked together for 10 years until 2013, able to sign the regional water saving when we identified that shrinkage of the Dead Sea, as well as making more water available to the region. But what's happened just recently, the World Bank is taking the project out of his agenda. I know, and how many people talking about the shrinkage of the Dead Sea? No one is talking about the shrinkage of the Dead Sea because we lost the interest on the project itself. Okay, so we kind of stopped talking about the shrinkage, and the Dead Sea remain losing 1 meter each year, and still facing its destiny. If we want to make a change, we have to stand with our words. We have to work really seriously. Everything that we talk, we agree upon. Even I was waiting to hear Alan Tal when he talked about climate change. And from now, even before listening to him, I do agree with him, because no one disagree with whatever good to be done in face of addressing climate change, resilience, mitigation, adaptation. All is good, but what we need and how to make that a reality. This is why when you ask about, okay, how I feel about EcoPeace, yes, I do endorse, okay, what EcoPeace is pushing for. I'm proud to say also that I'm pushing toward a Palestine Green Deal. You know, this is the trend. It's not the trend because it's a luxury. No, this is actually what the whole world needs to do in addressing the climate change. In a minute, we're going to have a Glasgow meeting addressing, okay, the failure of the whole world, addressing the global warming. Okay, and you see, just yesterday or today, there is 8 has been died in New York out of the flood. We witnessed what's happened in Germany and Belgium. We witnessed what happened in Turkey, and in Morocco, Algeria. Okay, so no one is immune from the consequences of climate change, and this is why, okay, that whether now we are talking among us, the Palestinian, about this initiative that I'm leading. I'm proud to say it, and I'm glad that Alon Tal is hearing me. You know, we Palestine as a state, but Israel doesn't recognize us as a state. We are a signatory to Basel Convention. We are a signatory to Paris Protocol. We are a signatory to the Biodiversity Convention. Israel too. Israel signatory to Basel, to biodiversity, to Paris climate change. What does prevent Israel Palestine? All the obligation under this international side agreement that Israel Palestine put themselves together and sign an environmental protocol.
So
okay,
actually,
so yeah, this is yeah, it's all good. You know, here, Louise, and maybe you can. Okay, we're fighting each other, and nowadays we don't talk to each other, but we do share the same resources. We do share land, we do share air, we do share sea, we do share aquifers. It's of our interest, Palestinian, whether we like Israeli or not, to keep and protect the aquifers. It's of our interest to resave the Dead Sea. It's of our interest to get access to the Jordan River and to get it really for all in good shape, for the Syrian, for the Lebanese, the Jordanian, the Israelis, and the Palestinian. But how to make this a reality? Until when we keep just talking that all good thing without really implementing them on the ground. There is something that we need the politician to get their ears to us, to the water people, okay? Because we do work together, okay? And we do understand each other. And we know that at a certain time, okay, if we don't cooperate, because it's not a choice, it's a must, okay, that we will pay a harsh and we will pay a heavy price for this. You know, we're living in the region and we are witnessing really hot waves. I think the Israelis also, they are witnessing the same. They are suffering the same. Okay, it's not only the people who's under occupation suffering, but also the occupier. And here, Alon Tal hearing me. I'm talking to you as a Palestinian, why we are under occupation. And I'm saying this because we do believe that we have to protect the environment and we have to start working to bear the consequences of the future climate change. Now, and I end here. The American leading the 10 billion a year. And I hope, Renevan, that you link each agreement, each financing to the Middle East and others to certain component of climate change.
Wow.
How to respond to climate change project that you are facing.
So Dr. Shaddad.
Anyway, I just telling just ideas, okay, that we have to talk about.
Dr. Shadat, so I understand, yeah, that you see that it's really needed to talk about climate change, and that you see also a lot of opportunities for this. So that was actually my other question. So I'll skip that one. But I wanted to ask, because I also feel that we have to go to Professor Tile to see how he, responds and what is his viewpoints on this matter. But what would you say the EU and European countries could do on this agenda to help out, to use this dialogue over the natural resources between the countries?
Yes, this is needed as a third party responsibility. As a third party, we need a mediator, because me and Aluntal, we cannot talk to each other. Okay, we need someone helping us talking. We need someone to tell the Israeli, you have to enable the Palestinian addressing the SDGs. We are failing to address each component, each goal in the SDGs because of the blockade on Gaza, because we don't have access to certain area to install solar panel in certain area. We have to get permit from the Israeli each time we need to do a reuse for our wastewater. These enabler, the Israeli has to enable us. When the Dutch, for example, or European comes and tell the Israeli, why you are preventing Palestinian from doing a solar panel instead of getting solar or fossil fuel. Israel will gain from whatever action we're doing addressing the climate change. Israel is gaining, okay? And as I tell you, it's of our interest to protect the environment and the water resources. This is why you, the European, okay, and thank for Europe and the Netherlands in particular also, you are doing a lot for the Palestinian and you are helping. But now we need to take the climate change on top of the agenda, because it's top in the agenda in the whole world. And the Middle East should not be really something that different. Yes, we are bearing the consequences of climate change, but believe me, if you help the parties, and don't forget the Syrian, even Syria is unstable, and the Lebanese, okay, don't really forget them. Get them all involved. We are the Jordan River Basin countries, okay, and we are sharing the same water, environment, and resources. It needs your help. It needs your mediation. And we are really open. We are really open to talk. As we did in the Red Canal, we were able to sit around one table. We're not in agreement all the time, but at the end we sign an agreement. We reach to an agreement, but we need your help. You need your mediation. We need your assistance, and also your financial assistance also to us.
All right, clear. So thank you so much. And I really feel that now we also have to bring in Professor Alon Taal to see, let's say, how he views the issue of climate change. I've seen that Israel, with the new government, is paying a lot more attention to climate security. Even the defense forces pay now more attention also to the vulnerabilities that climate change bring to the region. And I think it would be really interesting to hear more from you, Professor Alon Taal. You were a member of the Knesset. So climate change is now higher on Israel's political agenda, so it seems. Is it also an issue that Israel considers for dialogue with its neighbors?
Well,
Please.
Thanks so much, Louise, for the question, and in general for the Institute for hosting this important discussion. First of all, I think it is clear now to Israelis that the Middle East is a climate change hotspot. If the world's sea level rises at maybe 2 millimeters a year, it's as much as 10 off the Mediterranean coast and Israel. If we're looking at maybe a 1.1 degree cumulative rise in temperatures in the last century, we're looking just in the last 40 years in Tel Aviv and a 2 degree increase. In other words, all these dire predictions are happening in our region, in Palestine, Jordan, and in Israel, much sooner than it's taking place around the world. We see the frequency of forest fires, for example, just one area, because of the dryness of the wood and the vulnerability of it. And so the climate change isn't waiting for anybody. It's happening. And hopefully that My country is waking up and smelling the coffee. I'm delighted that I represent a party that is a central player in the new government we call the government of change. And it has both, I think, hopefully encouraging messages in the area of cooperation in the region. For the first time in 10 years, a senior Israeli government official met with President Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president, and had a 2-hour meeting. And he's the chairman of my party, Israel's defense minister, Benny Gantz, met with him. I had a detailed discussion with him about it, but I left him very optimistic that yes, perhaps there is, once again, we can go back to negotiating and moving forward in cooperation. And at the same time, this is the first government which has gone beyond lip service in climate change mitigation and adaptation commitments. We are voting for a budget today in the parliament, which is why I'm sort of in and out. It's sort of a tense time. But for the first time, I'm looking at a budget of over 2 billion shekels, which are going to climate change related areas, things like renewable energy support, energy efficiency standards.
So, Professor
so those two things together create, I think, a moment of opportunity where we can translate them together and hopefully produce an environmental benefit and a peace benefit.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so the amount of shekels you mentioned, how much would that be in dollars or euros?
In dollars. Divide by 3.5, but you have to remember, it's not nearly enough. I have a bigger appetite than that, but it is a sense that for many years, Israel was long on slogans and promises and short on implementation. I take, for example, our commitments under the Paris Accord, and I'm hoping that what we'll bring with us to Glasgow in terms of our nationally determined contribution will be far more significant. And we have now a government goal of by 2050 becoming basically a carbon neutral country, 95% reduction in emissions. That's not going to happen by itself. And it's not going to happen, I believe, without cooperation with our neighbors. We have very little land. We're very dependent on desalination as a source of water, about 70% of our drinking water. And we don't really have right now enough land to have the kind of renewable energy supply we'd like. Jordan, on the other hand, and other neighbors have lots of land. And it's high time that we turn to them and said, look, we are in this together, and let's take advantage of our proximity to the sea and our, I think, relative sophistication in terms of desalination technology, our ability to take water from the sea and turn it to potable water inexpensively, and your ability to generate clean electricity. And let's sort of try to use this shared, these infrastructures as a way of helping the planet and helping the relations. And I think those are very real things. I think also one thing that's very important in Israel, when we saw basically the implosion of the Syrian modern state, after 4 or 5 years of drought, we realized just how destabilizing climate change can be in this region, especially in agrarian and areas of the where farmers are literally facing unbearable situations, and water shortages may become crisis levels. In fact, in Jordan, we can pretty much say they're already at a crisis level. And this means that we have to deal with the climate crisis not as some sort of a generic slogan, but as something that requires the kind of I would say, generation of public commitment that we have in the defense area. And that's why I'm delighted that our Minister of Defense is on this. He also points out at the recent cabinet discussion on climate change that having a dispersed electricity sector, in other words, having solar panels on rooftops, is a far more promising security strategy than having 5 or 6 big coal or even natural gas plants, which are beckoning to our somewhat hostile neighbors in the terrorist regime in Gaza, and of course the Hezbollah in Lebanon, who have very much the same way that I could show it to you on Google Earth. They can see it as well. And so it's a much stronger security strategy to have a renewable energy supply. These are things which are entering the Israeli discourse and leave me a bit encouraged that we can move forward and maybe answer the call that Dr. Tilly made, which I agree with what he said. I think we need to do much better in sharing relative advantages to produce a common cooperative outcome.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. I wanted to ask, so I clearly see that there's a lot of energy. I wanted to ask if this is also the case on the issue of water, which is really such almost a matter of life and death for the region. And if you see the water levels in the Middle East, you know, they're also sometimes below the levels that are really required. And I wanted to ask if you could combine that with the other question that I have is, what the EU, European countries could do also to help, let's say, Israel to engage with its neighbor countries on this region, or perhaps also what shouldn't they do? I mean, are there areas where they should, in your view, become not to engage, or is it possible for them maybe with positive intentions to make naive mistakes? I would be very interested to hear your views on these issues.
Well, I think water is one area where we've learned in Israel that we have to rely on technology. I think when we first started our transition to a desalination water sector, many of us in the environmental community were a little uneasy. It sort of ran against the core ideas of sustainability, that we're on some sort of a spaceship Earth. And all of a sudden we're saying, well, actually, we can make as much water as we want, and we can. The Mediterranean will be able to supply enough water for Israel and Jordan and Palestine. However, that's only true if we get the energy component right, and we don't produce a carbon footprint because of this. So I believe that what we've learned in Israel, not only in the area of desalination, but in terms of wastewater reuse, I think we're leading the world there and looking at wastewater as a resource. And most recently, Israel's, I think, taken an important step in creating what we call the reverse water carrier, which is an attempt to take water from the Mediterranean and pump it to the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret Lake, which serves as a reservoir for Israel, but in fact should be a regional reservoir. Already we have an infrastructure in place to pump water under the Jordanian peace accords to Amman, and we should be able to increase those quantities considerably and relieve some of the really unbearable water stress and that is faced by the good residents of not just Amman, but the entire Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. So there is a lot that could be done in terms of cooperation, and I think that Israel can do it. In terms of the EU's role, I would like to see a much, much more prescriptive interventions on the EU part. I think the EU has historically been particularly generous in supporting the developing countries in our region and the economies of Palestine and Jordan. But wouldn't it be nice if you could help, and perhaps with forestry initiatives, and be a bit more prescriptive and get Israel on board? We know a lot about how to grow trees and sequester carbon in dry land areas. In fact, I think we probably know more than any country in the world in that area. Why aren't we doing joint forestry work with our neighbors? That would be something that would make a lot of sense. I completely agree with Sadat about the importance of producing renewables, solar electricity in Area C and in Palestine, giving them energy independence. Too much electricity from Palestine comes from Israel, and it doesn't help our carbon footprint as we try to reduce. No, we need to try to be much, much more proactive. And I think getting a healthy shove and tough love, or however you want to discuss it, from our Palestinian allies would be a welcome contribution to everybody. So yes, and Shadad mentioned we need to have an agreement. Well, about 20 years ago, as part of my role at the time as a Israeli director at EcoPeace, we wrote a shadow agreement. Myself and Dr. Hamedi, was then the Director General of the Palestinian Authority's Ministry of Environment, about how to work together. And I look back at that, and in preparation for this session, it's completely relevant today, unfortunately. We need to be doing this. And now I think we have a new government, which, although we are not going to work out all our differences with Palestine overnight, we can already see the change in the relationship. The king has met with our Prime Minister. We're starting to go back to a healthier time when we realize that the Middle East will be a better place by working together. We have the Abraham Accords, which have their own environmental dangers associated with them in terms of fossil fuel dependence. But on the whole, I would like to hope that we're facing, in 2 years from now, Jews around the world celebrate a new year. We have a new year in Israel. I'd like to hope that we can have a environmentally friendlier new year, which has a better blessing for the future of climate as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you so much. I think this was really, really useful. I also saw that Dr. Shadat maybe wants to respond. But I also wanted to bring in René van Nes from the European External Action Service to respond to what all three of you have said on the potential role of the EU and European countries, also with regards to environmental peace building opportunities in the region. So, Dr. Shadat, I hope you can hold your fire just a little more, and then I'll quickly go to René van Nes. René. First of all, can you say a little bit more? You're the head of the EU's Conflict Prevention and Mediation Unit. Is the EU now already taking climate change into account in its early warning and early action work? And could you also maybe give an example? Of course, it's always super difficult to say, here we have prevented the conflict, or we really saw it coming and we acted, but maybe there is, something that you could say about this effort that the EU is now undertaking.
Yeah, many thanks, Louise, and I'm happy to say a few words about that. Let me thank you for inviting me to this meeting. I think the meeting itself and the people that you have are already testifying sort of the power of climate change as a theme to bring people together. So I think in itself, it's already a great initiative. I'm really happy to see, well, happy is not the right word. It's great to see that passion and enthusiasm of Dr. Shaddad and Professor Tal. And indeed, their suggestions certainly merit further discussion and follow up. So let me be brief. If you ask a civil servant what are you doing, then often you end up with half an hour of explanations. I will try to be quick. First, climate change of climate is the EU's most urgent priority. I can say a bit more about that later, but let me just underline that the most important priority. Second, in terms of what this means for our peace and security policies, we are really aware of the necessity to address climate-related conflict risks. We consider climate change, and of course that is sort of a shorthand for everything related to environmental, energy, resources challenges, the largest security challenge of human history. And I'm so confident in saying that because I'm quoting my boss. I'm quoting the High Representative and Vice President Borrell, who has actually said this. So it's the largest security challenge of human history. So we are aware that climate change and climate challenges are particularly hitting countries that are already in a conflictuous situation where you have political marginalization. So it affects people that are already vulnerable, and they are affected the hardest of all. On top of that, when you look at the Middle East, and indeed a few of you already mentioned that, it's an area where global warming is and will be felt disproportionately. You will really be affected by this. Third thing that I would like to mention, and it's really from a very humble perspective, we are in an early stage. Yeah, we're doing a few things, and if you want, I can give you a few examples. But I'm really here to listen, to learn, and to better understand how we can take this forward in the field of conflict prevention and mediation. So briefly, what did we do? Well, we have an early warning system that looks at countries at risk of a violent conflict. And now we do include climate and water-related indicators as part of that early warning mechanism. So that means that the EU will respond where we see that climate, water is triggering violence. We are adopting a climate-sensitive focus when we make a conflict analysis. Of course, we are constantly analyzing the situations in a large number of countries. And, I have to admit that until recently, we paid very little attention to how conflict is actually driving, how climate is driving conflict. That we are doing now. We did a pilot in South Sudan, and we really learned a lot in how to take that forward. We have mediation guidelines, new ones, and you will see now for the first time that we have a specific chapter on how do you deal with the environment, how do you deal with climate change, how do you, as a mediator, take that forward. And we are indeed investing a lot in our own skills, the skills of the mediators, the skills of the staff within the EAS to take that, to do a lot more about this. Last thing that I want to mention here is partnerships. This is so big, no one can do this alone. So we have very strong partnerships on climate security with the United Nations, with the civil society, with think tanks like yourselves, and we really appreciate taking those forward. Let me stop here.
Mhm. Thank you. And I think it's also important what I see in the field of climate security. Indeed, if you don't look for it, you might not see it. But once you start to look at it and consider how natural resource sharing can be part of peace processes and mediation efforts, then, you know, it opens up a whole range of new possibilities and viewpoints. And I think that's something that's increasingly realized, and we see that also in the climate security best practices overview that we have on the PSI website. So that's really important. I also wanted to ask you about the spending. So the EU is very ambitious in climate change at home. But also 30% of its international spending needs to be climate related. So does that also mean that puts also additional, let's say, incentive to look at how to green conflict and prevention and peace building efforts? And is that something that's already being turned into practice, or is that more, let's say, for the coming 5 to 10 years?
Excuse me,
no,
I apologize Renee, before I have to apologize. I'm in our parliament. We are voting on a budget today, and we have a 61-59 parliamentary majority. I've just been summoned to vote, and
Okay.
I don't want the government to fall. So I'm going to take my leave and apologize. And I would like to take advantage of this and say to Dr. let's sit over a cup of coffee. Let's find a way to talk. We should be able to meet in East Jerusalem and find a way to talk, because I think that we are in a different place today than we were even 2 months ago, and maybe we can move forward. So I would accept your challenge.
Yes, Alan, I'm ready for coffee. But before you leave, I would prefer that when you talk about Gaza, not to talk about terrorist organization, talking about 2,200,000 people living without electricity, without proper water, and how to address this. We discussed this over coffee. Okay, before we Israel Palestine go to Glasgow, maybe we do something there.
Oh, that sounds marvelous. And also, I think that's really great that you make this coffee appointment. Professor Tal, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck with the voting, and keep the government up. Huh?
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye. So long. Good to see you, Jana.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. All right. Let's continue. So I wanted to ask to René van Nes. So 30% of the spending is going to be climate related, but let me also immediately ask the other question that I still had, which is with, let's say, the episodes that we saw in Afghanistan in the past few weeks in mind, and where the EU had heavily invested in trying to, you know, develop the country. So how can you avoid, let's say, that efforts maybe in climate adaptation, mitigation are in vain? And do you expect more of such support programs, or is it more in the field of, let's say, integration of climate security insights into mediation, peace building efforts? So to kind of to have local ownership, or should it be a combination of both? Do you have any reflections on this, René?
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, no, thanks, Louise. And let me just say that this must be one of the few meetings where I've participated in where during the meeting a decision is taken that is actually relevant, and that is the exchange that they will have over coffee. So I really, really appreciate having been part of that. Briefly, 30% of a budget doesn't mean anything. You need to know how much that budget is. Well, that budget is close to 80 billion euro. So we are talking about 24 billion euros that the EU is going to spend in the coming 7 years, earmarked to climate adaptation, climate mitigation. That is a whopping amount of money. We've never spent anything like that on climate-related issues. So it's brand new. We've never done that before. The agreement on this budget is very, very new and fresh. So how this is going to shape the dialogue in these countries is up to the countries, of course, and to my colleagues that are responsible for this. So this is major. I really want to underline this. This is a major change, and I really hope that everyone will seize that opportunity and contribute to thinking how you can do that in the best way. So the partnerships that we have with Israel, Palestine, Jordan will indeed talk about how best to invest these resources. You mentioned Afghanistan, and I noted that I sort of immediately responded to that. I would not like to equate what is happening in the Middle East to Afghanistan. I think Afghanistan is a very particular situation, and so I would like to sort of immediately say, okay, that is very different. We have a long-standing neighborhood partnership with a joint agenda between the EU and the wider Mediterranean region. Recently, there was renewed. I think it is at a whole different level of partnership than what happened in Afghanistan. We have identified now climate and environment as a key area of cooperation. So that is really going to be part of the constant. Sorry, let me switch it off. Sorry about that. We are putting this on the agenda. We are going to have this discussion, as I hope that our partners will put it on the agenda, and I'm sure that they're doing this. I wanted to mention a particular point, a point that sort of comes to me from a practitioner's perspective. You know, when I talk to our people that are trying to negotiate peace agreements, and I tell them, you know, you should really start to look at climate change. Sometimes what I get from them is, you know, it's already so difficult. Look at the Middle East peace process. We've been trying and done everything. And now you want me to look at climate as well? So what it shows is that often we still work in these silos. We have people that are really focusing on the peace process. We have people that really know about climate. And for me, the big challenge and the contribution that you're giving today is to bring these together. That is what we have to do. We need to bring these two worlds together and to make sure that those that negotiate peace understand that you can no longer do that without looking at climate change related issues and vice versa. So we really have to make sure that we make all these suggestions, both conflict and climate sensitive. Maybe I stop here so that we have maybe some time for some further questions and answers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. And I saw that there were quite a number of questions posed, but we're also running out of time, and we wanted to keep this really to 1 hour. But I'll just ask, and it's a very difficult question to you, Tobias, maybe because some of the questions are also in a way suggestions. Maybe you can just mention the issues that were raised in the questions, and then we can all keep them in mind and see if we can address them also in our future activities of the Planetary Security Initiative. And also, I'm sure that René and Diana and Dr. Shaddad will bring them on board. And I'm also sure that the staff members of Professor Taal are still here. So that, and also the partners from EcoPeace Israel, Guidon Bromberg, and also EcoPeace Palestine, Nada Magellan, they are also here in the Zoom, and they also listening in. So Tobias, would it be possible for you to just mention some of the topics that were mentioned in the questions?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I mean, there were some specific questions. For instance, to what extent Syria needs to be involved in the Jordan River issues and the Jordan River Valley plans. There were also questions on how the Gulf states, for instance, could play a role in green and environmental projects, etc. And there were a couple of questions, let's say, grouped around the question of policy making and foreign policy making in the region, but also for the EU and other actors. And to what extent and how foreign policy making needs in general to focus a bit more on environmental topics, on climate change, on these topics, and to what extent natural resources, etc., should play a bigger role in general in foreign policy making as I said, in the region, but also outside the region.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, thanks. So I'll give 1 minute to Dr. Shadat and 1 minute to René and 1 minute to Jana to say a few words. I also wanted to say that we are also looking at the greening the MENA initiative by the Gulf states, by Saudi Arabia, for the Planetary Security Initiative website, because we think that's an important development. And in any case, we see that more actors also from security and defense circles are becoming interested in this agenda and these topics, and wrestling all with these questions of how to do it. And I think again, then if you see the nearly 30 years experience of EcoPeace, that it's really remarkable. And that there still, I also hope that this blue-green deal and the ability of Jordan to sell renewable energy to Israel and to buy desalinated water in return. That's to summarize it. That this is really going to work out, and I also hope that this ideas of giving more ownership to Palestine over their own natural resources is something that's going to fly. And yeah, let's give the speakers 1 minute each, and then we really have to round off, because if we promise an hour, we also should stick as close as possible to that. Jana, please.
Louise, thank you. This is one of the really very interesting and important webinars that I've attended. I'm fascinated that we're all agreeing, and we're seeing that there's no time to waste. Dr. Shaddad Alontal made it very clear that we are at the right time to be discussing these issues. We have no time to lose. And let's all work together to focus on doing something at Glasgow. Let's have at least all the 3 parties sit together, hopefully with the EU mediating, to sign agreements to work together on combating climate change and working on those doable solutions, the ones that we're talking about, like the water energy nexus, the educational programs, which we all must work on together. Yes, let's. We have no time to lose, and let's make it happen. And I think it's the right time, and we will. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you. Very good. And also, I hope that this Glasgow idea is going to materialize. Dr. Shaddad, please. What is your final takes?
For the 1 minute, we'll let you know what happened. What will happen between me and Alontal, because almost of the Israeli, they don't know what's happening beyond the wall. Just a few days ago, the army destroyed solar panel in a village in Area C. Your investment in Gaza, Europe has invested a lot of money, hundreds of millions, on building sewage treatment plant. Almost of them are not functioning because lack of electricity, lack of power. There is a daily discharge of sewage untreated, 120,000 cubic meter a day. Let's address this. Let's work on establishing a monitoring center for depollution of the Mediterranean. For my friend René Van Nys, we're still ahead 2 months from Glasgow. Have the European working on a summit, because head of state will be attending there. Let's have just the head of state in the region agreeing on a climate change, on a framework, not on a detailed one, just expressing interest. See how to get the Middle East. In the Middle East, green initiative launched by Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince in Saudi Arabia. Part of his initiative was treeing more than 10 billion tree in the Middle East. Let's see how this will be materialized in the Middle East. So in Glasgow, try to make side event between the parties, try to agree on certain things, on adaptation, resilience, on expressing of willingness to work on climate change, knowing that there is it's a conflict area, a politically high conflict area, but let's keep the hope. Water resources should be immune. Climate change, we have to work together, because we do share benefit as we do share pain.
All right. Thank you so much. René, your final 1 minute.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I mean, I'm really taken by the passion and the deep knowledge of Jana and Dr. Shaddad. Thanks for these suggestions. I will really take that forward. I'm not sure that we can do it before Glasgow, but I totally agree that there is no time to waste. As I say, we are taking this more serious now than ever before, creating whole new structures here that are dedicated to this issue. I think you have given us a very clear illustration of the importance of this issue for your region. You can see that you're personally very much engaged and affected by this. So many thanks for your suggestions. I really hope that you will have a good conversation with Professor Tao. I think that's where it all starts, people talking to each other. And if we can play a role in those talks,
you can pay for the coffee.
I would happily join you. That would be fantastic. Many thanks.
That's the least, yeah. That's
yeah.
the least you can do. No, I think that's really marvelous. And also, I would really again like to thank you. Please pay for the coffee and more. Please take the coffee and please continue with all the good work that you're doing, EcoPeace Middle East. Thank you for the speakers, but also for the people that helped. I already mentioned Gidon and Nada from EcoPeace Israel and Palestine. And also my own colleagues Maha Yassin from the Planetary Security Initiative and Joris from the Communication Department of the Klingenau Institute, and Tobias, our Middle East expert. And also this provides for us, I think, also a lot of new impetus and inspiration to continue our work and to get that piece out on the Greening the MENA initiative by the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia. And please stay tuned in, I would say, on the planetary security efforts. Register for the newsletter, follow us on Twitter, and share also any practices that you have or experiences, because I think we still have a lot of, let's say, learning curve ahead of us on this topic. Yeah. Thank you again. Thank you to all the participants. Thank you for asking questions and your enthusiasm, and see you in the next meeting. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.